Hey everyone, if you're in the music industry long enough and work in recording studios or even live on stage, you're going to hear someone mention Neve at some point. And it is Neve and not Neve. We're talking about preamps here and not famous actresses. In this video, I'm going to talk about the history of Rupert Neve. A lot of people hear the name, but don't know the true depth of his work. And in this video, we're going to talk about all of the things that he was involved in. In the video after this one, we'll talk about some of the iconic gear like the 1073 and his other outboard gear, and even some microphones he had a hand in designing. So be sure to like the video and subscribe so you can get alerted when that one drops. Let's get started. I actually started working on this video in 2020. At one point, I had about 25 minutes out of 36 done, and unfortunately, I moved before I could finish it. And instead of continuing that project years later, midstream, I thought it made sense to start fresh. Rupert Neve was born in 1926 in Newton Abbot, England. However, he spent most of his early years in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where his father was a missionary with the British and Foreign Bible Society. This was an organization that helped get Bibles to areas of the world that might not otherwise have had easy access. And early on, he began designing audio amplifiers and receivers. He started doing this at around age 13. So whereas I'm over there playing Xbox at the age of 13, he's designing all this amazing gear as far as audio amplifiers and radios go. During World War II, the demand for radios and repairing them increased exponentially, thus increasing his skills even more. He ended up serving in World War II in the Army's Royal Corps of Engineers, and effectively they would manage battlefield communications in this division of the Army. So he has all of this experience in electronics and communications when he gets out of the Army. And when he first gets out, he works for a company called, I'm going to call it Rediffusion, or Rediffusion. In a way, they were similar to a cable TV company like Comcast today, distributing television and radio signals through a wired relay network. So again, not broadcasting through the air, but through cables. And he was only there a short time before he started CQ Audio. And this company specialized in the design of hi-fi equipment. The company did okay, but didn't really have earth-shattering success. I kind of imagine looking at the designs that they were a bit ahead of their time. And this did teach him about manufacturing and production and sales and some critical pieces for when he would start his next company. And this is when he started his next company, Neve Electronics. His first break came from Desmond Leslie, who was a composer of musique concrète. And this was a type of music utilizing natural sounds instead of instruments to create compositions. So kind of interesting. Desmond needed a way to easily adjust the levels of all of his source content. Thus, really the modern day mixer was born. This first console was actually a tube-based mixer because that's just what was available at the time. That was the technology. And after that, Rupert started building some other consoles. The first transistor-based solid-state console he made was put into Philips recording studios in London in 1964. And transistors were a new technology at this time, but those designs were extremely stable, as that was one benefit of solid-state technology compared to tube technology. And in 1970, Neve released the BCM 10.2, with the 1066 mic preamps. And Pete Townsend of The Who was one of the first customers, and according to the AMS Neve website, he actually still has the console over 50 years later. It's crazy. And next we get to the famous Neve 1073 preamp. It made its debut in the Wessex A88 console in 1970. And Rupert and company didn't stop there, as they were getting extremely well known and popular at this point. The Neve 8048 console with the 1081 preamp was released in 1974, and some pretty iconic recordings were made on these consoles with artists like Queen, David Bowie, Led Zeppelin, Iggy Pop, and Deep Purple. So a lot of the main acts of the day. And it's worth noting that Rupert actually sold the Neve company to another company called Bonaccord Group in 1973. He stayed on for 2 years, so he was still working on the 8048 and other projects. Coincidentally, Bonaccord Group would eventually sell the Neve company to Siemens, who would eventually sell Advanced Music Systems, or they would sell to them in the UK to form AMS Neve as we know it today. So Rupert's early Neve company designs and contributions were pretty huge. We have a host of preamps, EQs, compressors, and we're going to talk about and listen to these pieces of gear in another video in the series, the next one. After working at the Neve company he sold, for 2 years after that, he decided to leave. He did sign a 10-year non-compete agreement, so he couldn't directly start another company. This is where he started to get a little bit prolific in his work. He formed ARN Consultants with his wife Evelyn, and over the years he would collaborate with companies on their designs and start other legendary companies. Let's start with his first notable one. In 1985, when his non-compete was up, he started Focusrite. Yeah, that's right. So the company that you still know of, that still exists today, is something that Rupert Neve created. And he designed the famous ISA 110 preamp with a Lundahl transformer and a Neve EQ circuit, as well as the ISA 130 VCA compressor. And he tried to expand and improve on really what he had already been working at the Neve company. Now, the ISA 110 built quite the buzz, and Beatle producer George Martin wanted a full-on console built. However, these modules were built so well and were so expensive to produce that ultimately only 2 original Forte consoles were ever made. One was sent to Master Rock Studios in London, and the other one went to Electric Lady in New York. So the extreme cost of the Forte console proved to be just too much, and Rupert ended up needing to sell the company to Phil Dudrich, who had recently sold his company, you may have also heard of, called Soundcraft. In a lot of ways, these stories are kind of like the story of our industry. Phil created the Focusrite Studio console. They were able to produce 10 of these desks, and they had a massive amount of inputs for the day. I think there were around 70 channels of input on these consoles. The DNA of those consoles were the ISA 110 and the ISA 130 modules that Rupert had worked on. And those consoles are still in use today at legendary studios all over the world, like Electric Lady Studio A, Chicago Track Studio 1, and United Studio A. But most, I think 6 of those original consoles are now in private studios. Now, once Rupert sold Focusrite, he didn't slow down. He jumped into a design role helping Amek or Amek Systems designed some of their consoles. So from Rupert Neve Company to Focusrite to Amek. And he continued to take things that he had learned from his time working at on hi-fi at CQ and on consoles at the Neve Company and Focusrite, and he delved into work at Amek. And his first product there was the System 9098 dual microphone preamp. So you can tell he was always experimenting and reiterating ideas to form new platforms. The sound of the Amek console preamp is considered to be more transparent and clear than a Neve or SSL or even his Focusrite designs. And the EQ was great for giving it a vibey sound if you wanted that, or getting a little bit more surgical and precise if you needed to really dial that in. I actually first came to know about Amek from the Smashing Pumpkins record Adore, where the record was partially done on an Amek console at the Chicago Recording Company. And you can still get vintage Amek gear. And I say vintage, it's from like the mid-90s, like the 9098 preamp and the EQ outboard units fairly inexpensively. I found this one on Reverb while I was doing my research over the last week or two. And the console that came out as a result of this collaboration was called the 9098i. And here's a picture of that as the 72 channel console version. And here is a picture of the 56 input 9098i. This console had full automation and recall and panning for film and even supported 5.1. Its history isn't as pronounced as Neve consoles or the Focusrite Forte, but it was still an incredible design, and it's still loved by lots of users today, and a lot of those consoles are still in use. So far, most of what we've been talking about has been relegated to recording studios, but Rupert was about to branch out into a more wide collaborative effort or efforts. In the early 2000s, Rupert would work with Taylor Guitars to develop their original electronic system on their guitars, as well as the Taylor K4 preamp and EQ. I actually sold these when I first entered the MI industry. For many years, those were out in the public. And Rupert worked in tandem with David Hostler to develop a system that made the guitar sound more natural when it was plugged in. On top of great craftsmanship, the Taylor Expression System and the K4 really helped lend to Taylor's explosive growth. They became synonymous with great sound quality plugged in, and that really helped catapult the brand to legendary status, both with church musicians as well as live performers on stage. So Rupert's role in all of that just isn't as widely known, but I think it's critical to get that out there. Now, let's take a step back for a moment. Rupert and his wife Evelyn had moved to Wimberley, Texas, I think around 1995 is what I had seen, and they actually became US citizens in 2002. So in the midst of working with Taylor, Rupert started what was to be his final company, really, called Rupert Neve Designs. Now, Rupert and the Rupert Neve Designs team would continue to develop gear for the modern musicians in large studios, stages, and home studios all around the globe. They launched the Portico modules in 2005 with a slightly different look, using what Rupert had learned from the original Neve company, Focusrite and Amek, and merging a lifetime's worth of work into these units. The Portico preamp and EQ add clarity and depth to their source, but with the addition of their silk controls, you can add different harmonic coloration. So Silk Red will enhance harmonic content generated by high frequencies and high mid frequencies in your source, and Silk Blue will accentuate the lower frequencies. And at Rupert Neve Designs, they developed a whole line of absolutely amazing gear from the legendary Portico Master Bus Processor, or MBP, to the 5057 summing mixer, the 542 tape emulator, the 511 preamp, on top of amazing DI boxes and headphone amplifiers, and the list goes on and on. And many of these units are still available, and I have a lot of them back behind me over there. They're absolutely phenomenal. And although the Portico series represented Rupert pushing the bar as much as he could, or the full evolution of his designs, he could never quite escape the fame of his early designs like the 1073 made in Little Shelford, England. And those designs are some of the most copied and cloned pieces of gear in the world. So Rupert Neve Designs eventually released the Shelford channel. It had a circuit design essentially the same as the old Neve company designs, and contained a preamp, inductor EQ, and diode bridge compressor with the addition of the silk circuit. So that was the big change with that Shelford unit. And from my personal experience, I would say it's one of, if not the best-selling high-end channel strip in modern times. Its build quality is phenomenal with medical build precision, and the sound quality is off the charts. And the final console that Rupert Neve would develop is the Rupert Neve Designs 5088 console. It's available in a host of different packages and is really the pinnacle of amazing sound in a console. Yes, companies like API, SSL, or even AMS Neve make great consoles today too, but from a purely sound perspective, it's pretty tough to beat a 5088. And better yet, you can still buy it and get a warranty on it today. The vintage Neve consoles are amazing too, but in some cases you're buying gear that's over 50 years old now, so you have to kind of think about that. I'm going to talk more about the classic pieces of gear and discuss them in the next video in the series, but I wanted to pay tribute to Rupert for laying the foundation for so many studios and musicians all over the world. And it is worth mentioning that there's an offshoot hi-fi company from Rupert Neve Designs called Fidelis, or Fidelis. Fidelis is translating to faithful or loyal effectively, and it makes sense because the aim of hi-fi gear is typically to produce a beautiful and organic sound for its listeners. Rupert also developed some products in tandem with SC Electronics that are pretty amazing, albeit off the beaten path a little bit. There's a large diaphragm tube condenser called the RNT. There's a small diaphragm condenser called the RN17 with a massive transformer. So it looks different than your normal small diaphragm condenser. And there's also an active ribbon microphone called the RNR1 that blends the benefits of active ribbon technology. So, active meaning supply the phantom power to it, in tandem with two Rupert Neve designed transformers on top of ribbon vibe. So it's truly a beautiful thing and a really unique product on the market. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and were able to learn some things about Rupert that you didn't know before, and many of his contributions to the music and recording industry. In the next video in this series, I'm going to expand on some of his classic designs across his lifetime of work with sound examples. I hope you'll join me then. For the Gear Cage, I'm Ryan Sloan, and if you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email, as always, at hello@thegearcage.com. Thanks for watching.